Hey look everyone, we're finally in a year where it's not unreasonable to expect that movies will release on time. Yes, the hopefully glorious year of 2022 is now upon us. And with each passing year comes the hope that things will be better both for our regular lives, but also in the realm of entertainment. I didn't make this list last year since there was still plenty of uncertainty over what movies would actually release, given that there hadn't been a widely available COVID-19 vaccine until the springtime. The virus still hasn't gone away, but at least now that it's reasonably safer to go to the movies as opposed to how things were a year ago, bigger movies tend to stick to their scheduled release dates. For me personally, even though those types of popular blockbusters don't usually dominate my top 10 favorites each year, that doesn't mean I don't get excited for them. 2022 actually has plenty that I'm gunning for due to the talent involved. However, if one that you're hyped for doesn't end up on my list, don't automatically assume that I'm not excited for it. After all, there are many films slated for release next year that I would happily pay money to see. The following 10 movies are simply the ones that I'd be quicker to see if someone forced me to choose from a list of alternatives. Perhaps it's helped by the fact that most of these movies have released trailers, and many of what would be my honorable mentions haven't released one yet. And of course, they are listed in order of how excited I am to see them. Let's get started, shall we?
Number 10.
I put the unbearable weight of massive talent at the bottom of the list since I'm undeniably excited to see it, but at the same time, it's also the movie I'm least expecting to be good. You get what I'm saying? When it comes to comedies, I just tend to be a really tough laugh, especially if all a comedy really has going for it is raunchiness. Therefore, I have a tough time getting excited for these kinds of movies, since I can never anticipate if I will enjoy what's being shown to me. But at least this film has a solid enough premise to grab my attention. I was already sold on the idea of Nicolas Cage playing himself, since he's an actor who's proven to be quite pleased with portraying characters that appeal to his most well-known sensibilities. The movie takes a step further, though, with this doozy of a premise.
Creatively unfulfilled and facing financial ruin, Nick Cage must accept a $1 million offer to attend the birthday of a dangerous superfan. Things take a wildly unexpected turn when Cage is recruited by a CIA operative and forced to live up to his own legend, channeling his most iconic and beloved on-screen characters in order to save himself and his loved ones.
I mean, that right there just explains everything one would need to know, doesn't it? I'm really hoping this movie turns out better than the admittedly underwhelming trailer, because if this takes full advantage of its concept, the end result could be a banger.
Number 9.
Even though I have yet to see their previous film Swiss Army Man, the directing duo known as Daniels have certainly caught my attention with their upcoming sci-fi action trip, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I really gravitate towards films that have distinct but dynamic visual styles, the likes of which permeate throughout the mesmerizing trailer. Toying with different aspect ratios, color palettes, and even mediums, I'm expecting this to be a wondrous feast for my eyes. But more importantly, since Marvel wore me out with their attempts at establishing their multiverse in 2021, I'm more open to the idea of an original story tackling that concept. Who knows if it's going to be overly convoluted or not, but I'm nonetheless hoping this turns out well.
Number 8.
This next film is coming from a director whose films I will always show up for. Makoto Shinkai wrote and directed one of my all-time favorite movies, Your Name, so I was very happy to learn that his next anime, Susume No Tojimari, will be released in 2022. Granted, there's no telling if it will come stateside by the end of the year. It's supposed to release in Japan first, and since it won't make its debut until the fall, it may be unlikely that an English dub will be ready before the year is through. If it does come out on time, cool, but if not, I'll eagerly await for when it eventually does. I'm looking forward to whatever this story ends up being.
Number 7.
I'm always willing to give new Pixar films a shot, and the ones releasing in 2022 are no exception. Since they are releasing 2, I decided to cheat and rank Turning Red and Lightyear together as one. After all, I am excited for both. Some might be shocked that I have any shred of excitement for Turning Red, since a lot of people seem to have been turned off by the most recent trailer, and to be honest, I get it. The newest trailer was admittedly a bit obnoxious in the way it was edited together. But my optimism for it lies in that it's the rare big-budget animation animation, which actually feels like it's taking advantage of the fact that it's a cartoon. Animation allows filmmakers the opportunity to tell stories that just wouldn't come across as well via live action, but Pixar took things a bit further here in that the character expressions and images are heavily exaggerated, even more so than the expressiveness their films already have. Visual inspiration seems to have been taken from the works of Studio Ghibli and other anime films, which is appropriate considering that Eastern Asian culture is being depicted front and center in the story. I really hope Turning Red ends up surprising people in the way I'm hoping it will. But on the flip side, Lightyear is rejecting more cartoony sensibilities with an art style and tone more akin to an epic space adventure. Again, for the sake of addressing backlash, I get that many people would rather see Pixar spending their time making new IP rather than rehashing previously existing franchises. I mean, I happen to be one of those people. But I am perfectly okay with this film existing for a number of reasons. This isn't even the first time Pixar has commissioned something about the actual character of Buzz Lightyear the Space Ranger, so I'm fine with Pixar wiping the slate clean and giving his origin story another shot. Second, I love science fiction, so I'm all on board with Pixar playing around in the genre again. While WALL-E was more of the soulful type of sci-fi storytelling, Lightyear is leaning into a more action-oriented type of narrative, which could be interesting. But perhaps the biggest reason for my faith in the project is that Pete Docter wrote the screenplay. If you know anything about his pedigree at the studio, he knows what he's doing when putting a story together. All in all, 2022 should be an exciting year for Pixar.
Number 6.
Count the seventh Mission Impossible movie as one of many movies whose production was severely hampered by the pandemic. It's been tough waiting for this to release since 2018's Fallout was so friggin' good, but now that it's finally getting its time in the spotlight this September, I guess I can wait a little while longer. After all,
you can't rush art.
Like other movies on this list, it is one whose story currently remains a mystery. But an interesting fact about the film is that it's simultaneously being made alongside an 8th installment set for release in July 2023. One could only assume then that this will be part 1 of what could very well be some sort of climactic story for the series. I'll be intrigued to see whether or not this ends up being the case. Whatever happens with the story though, if Tom Cruise wants to keep doing these movies until he keels over from doing the death-defying stunts he's obsessed with pulling off, I will keep showing up.
Number 5.
Speaking of movies that are being split into 2 parts, who would have guessed that the sequel to Into the Spiderverse would be one to be written and produced that way? Yes, Across the Spiderverse is being segmented into 2 movies, the likes of which we will see the first of in early October. Totally fine by me though, since I couldn't get enough of the wondrous beauty of the original film back in 2018. As long as the team can retain at least some of the quality present in that knockout first film, that will be enough for me. Given that one of the film's directors worked on the very best episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender, I can't imagine that this wouldn't live up to expectations. Now it just remains to be seen what the full extent of the story will end up being, and which multiverse iterations of Spider People will interact in the story, but at least we got confirmation that Oscar Isaac will be in the cast as Miguel O'Hara. This will hopefully be one of the best superhero films of the year once it releases.
Number 4.
As much as Star Wars fans would love to see Rian Johnson's career crash and burn, he isn't going away anytime soon. In fact, due to how massively successful Knives Out was with critics and audiences in 2019, it's safe to say that he still has a bright, productive future ahead of him. In particular, he's recently wrapped production on a sequel to Knives Out for Netflix, with Daniel Craig returning as Detective Benoit Blanc. No information currently exists on what the actual story will be, but given how much I adore the first film, that doesn't hold me back from being excited about what Rian Johnson has in store for us. If the excellent ensemble cast is anything to go by, it should at the very least be a fun time. Here's to hoping that Netflix announces a release date sooner than later.
Number 3.
I know at the beginning I said it was tough for me to rank films I don't know much about higher than ones that have trailers or at least satisfying amounts of plot info available, but The Fablemens is an exception for a number of reasons. First things first, it's a new film from Steven Spielberg, who has been and always will be one of my favorite filmmakers. His output in the past decade has not been as exciting as years past, but that's primarily due to his choices of projects. In this case though, The Fablemens is about as personal of a project as it could get for him, since this is the first screenplay he was directly involved with writing in over 20 years. It would make sense that he would write the script, since it's a semi-autobiographical take on his childhood in Arizona. And that last part is the kicker. As a native of the Phoenix Valley, I can't wait to see what Spielberg has to say both visually and narratively from his years spent here. We'll find out on November 23rd.
Number 2.
In spite of how many different versions of the Caped Crusader have existed on the silver screen, I'm happy to leave room for another interpretation since the Batman looks amazing. Matt Reeves was a great choice for someone to provide a new, possibly even grittier perspective on Batman than what we had seen in years past. After all, he did an excellent job lending a sense of grounded drama to his Planet of the Apes movies, and that seems to have carried over seamlessly to this. Film fans, including myself, have been speculating for quite a while as to whether or not this will be the equivalent of Seven for superhero films, and I really hope that's the case since it would be appropriate for the universe Gotham exists in. But I'm not keeping my hopes too high that it will be exactly that. I just want for there to be a legitimate reason to restart Batman once again, and given the material we've seen of the film thus far, it nonetheless looks very promising. If you were to force me to choose which one out of all possible movies I could watch in 2022, it would be The Northman. Having already loved both The Witch and The Lighthouse, I was eager to see whatever the immensely talented Robert Eggers had cooked up next. But upon learning a couple years ago that his forthcoming project would be a 10th century Viking epic, I was immediately sold. One thing he showed a knack for with those two aforementioned movies is a commitment to historical authenticity, both in the dialogue and production design. His films felt specific to the era they were depicting as a result. With The Northman, even though his cast doesn't entirely consist of Icelandic performers, the trailer expresses that he's still keenly aware of the culture he's bringing to life on screen. And with that, he's putting every cent of his budget into each image we'll see. The film's present look and tone has already impressed me more than I expected to be, and I'm also surprised that it's promising to be more action-packed than what I originally thought. Bring on this epic adaptation of Viking mythology, since due to the great talent involved, this will surely be one of the most cinematic events of the new year. And that's it! As mentioned earlier, there are many movies to be excited for in 2022. These just happen to be the ones that stood out to me the most. Feel free to let me know which ones you're excited for in the comments below. Also, you might be wondering why I put this list out before listing my favorite and least favorite movies of 2021. And yes, I am different than most YouTubers from that standpoint, and that I did put this out before those lists, but I do have a lot more movies to watch before I feel comfortable narrowing down what those lists would be. My goal is usually to put up my list of the best movies of a given year on the night or the night before the Oscars, so anticipate that list coming around that time in March, but otherwise, my worst movies of the year list should come out sometime before then. If you liked this video and would be interested in seeing more of my projects, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining the notification squadron so that you don't miss out on my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great one.